voters in Britain aren't stupid, I think what UKIP says is largely accurate. I mean, for example, that the European Union has never had accountants sign off on their budget. I mean, this is a fact, and it's really bad, and it makes the financial transparency of the European Union look something like a joke, right? But the UKIP concludes that therefore we should leave the European Union. Whereas if you look at who the UKIP voters are, the big demographic shift for me isn't urban-rural, it's an age thing. Older people are voting UKIP. Nobody under the age of 40 wants to leave the European Union. And that's because for somebody under the age of 40, the pros of the European Union are completely clear. The free movement of people, the travelling around, the job opportunities, the multiculturality. I think young people see the European Union as a positive fact of their lives. That's why they're not really voting for anti-European Union parties. But then you have this kind of problem where politics is dominated by older people, particularly older voters over the retirement age. These are the people most threatened by the global restructuring of the economy. They're the ones that are anti the European Union. So they're voting to leave the European Union just at a time where a demographic switch is probably going to take place, I'd say within 10 or 15 years, where basically the kinds of people for whom the European Union is an accepted normal fact of life are going to become the average middle-aged voter in this country. And then I think the European Union, I mean, there's no case against it, I think, for young people.
How do you imagine the people get power?
Well, I imagine there are sort of hierarchical systems that have been preserved through generations.
They get power by being voted in.
Well,
That's how they
Jeremy,
get it.
but
You can't even be asked to vote.
It's quite a narrow prescriptive parameter that changes within the...
In a democracy, that's how it works.
Well, I don't think it's working very well, Jeremy, given that the planet is being destroyed, given that there is economic disparity of a huge degree. What are you saying? There's no alternative. There's no alternative.
No, I'm not
just this
saying
system.
that. I'm saying if you can't be asked to vote, why should we be asked to listen to your political point of view?
You don't have to listen to my political point of view, but it's not that I'm not voting out of apathy. I'm not voting out of absolute indifference and weariness and exhaustion from the lies, treachery, deceit of the political class that has been going on for generations now, and which has now reached fever pitch, where we have a disenfranchised, disillusioned, despondent underclass that are not being represented by that political system. So voting for it is tacit complicity with that system, and that's not something I'm offering up.
What is Nigel Farage's success based on? Well, one thing is key, and it is a lack of trust. When they're asked how much they trust leading politicians from the main parties to tell the truth, the result is really stark. 22% say yes, but a whopping 72% say no. Now, UKIP are set to benefit from that mistrust in the UK, but of course European elections are playing out right across the continent, and a similar dynamic is at play pretty much all over the place. If you have a look in Finland, you've got 57% of people saying they don't trust politicians, 59% for Sweden, Denmark 61%, 70% in Germany, and a whopping 78% there in France. That's almost 4 in 5 disenchanted. And that means what you're going to see is a dramatically different complexion to the European Parliament this time round, full of new faces, minority and protest parties, and a massive slap in the face for the European political establishment.
The People's Army of UKIP have spoken tonight and delivered just about the most extraordinary result that has been seen in British politics for 100 years, and I'm proud to have led them to that.
The main parties don't represent us. That they're all the same. That none of them actually offer any alternative. And if you look as well at the kind of rhetoric that Farage uses, he talks about being the people's army or whatever. So this is like a populist rhetoric. I don't think you could have had that kind of like rise of UKIP if it wasn't for like the anti-austerity movement opening that kind of gap and delegitimising them.
You could argue that younger voters are actually more alienated from political processes than they are apathetic about them. In fact, you're far more likely to see young people protesting, marching, joining alternative kinds of political parties and engaged in alternative forms of political participation to voting. So I wouldn't necessarily draw the conclusion that apathy is to blame.
You have to keep it in context as well. Voter turnout is still really tiny, and actually it was only a very small minority of people voted for UKIP, let alone voted at all, which is obviously a sign of what I was saying in the first place as well. People don't feel that one vote every 4 years can actually achieve anything that will change their lives.
Young people are accumulating a lot of debt a lot earlier. The kinds of technologies that young people want to buy require money. So it may be that you've got a limited amount of time in your life when you're young, and you've simply got better things to spend your time on than the political process. Work, socialization, studying, going to university. So the conclusion that young people not voting and low turnout in European elections is necessarily caused by apathy, I think we do have to question that.
We're in a time where communication is instantaneous, and there are communities all over the world. The Occupy movement made a difference, even if only in that it introduced to the popular public lexicon the idea of the 1% versus the 99%. People for the first time in a generation are aware of massive corporate and economic exploitation. These things are not nonsense, and these subjects are not being addressed.
I've said the system has to change. I've said it's wrong and it should be amended. We want to abolish the present system.
The whole system is rotten. It needs to change. I've been a part of that system and I apologise for that.
The report has misunderstood the system.
It's not a question of, I think, feeling, well, we've done something wrong. It's just the system is wrong.
The system's got to change for sure.
We've got to reform the system.
Under the system, it wasn't necessary to put receipts in.
The system is wrong. It needs to be changed.
This system is not fit for purpose, and we have long acknowledged that.
I value my reputation and the reputation of Parliament far more than I do the right just to claim this money under a flawed system.
The public must have confidence in the system by which members of Parliament of all political parties are paid, and I want to ensure that the system is the right one for the future.
I've complied with the rules of the House, the rules of the Inland Revenue, and that's the situation as it is.
I'm very confident that nothing I've done is against the rules or the spirit of the rules.
The arrangements that I have made are within the rules.
I've acted within the rules. It's an error, which obviously I wish had not happened.
They were within the rules, and that is why they advised me to do that.
All the claims that I made were agreed in advance with the visa, all of them.
I don't believe I have broken any rules at all.
I've done nothing wrong, and so I'm not apologising.
Mr Mackay, you must have known they weren't within the spirit of the rules, Mr Mackay.
No, I'm going to move on now.
Within the existing paradigm, the change is not dramatic enough, not radical enough. So you can well understand public disturbances and public dissatisfaction when there are not genuine changes and genuine alternatives being offered. I say when there is a genuine alternative, a genuine option, then vote for that. But until then, don't bother. Why pretend? Why be complicit in this ridiculous illusion?
May 13, 1968, the 10th anniversary of de Gaulle's return to power. Hundreds of thousands of workers joined the students in an act of public defiance. Not since the Popular Front of 1936 has France seen such street demonstrations. style of expression is new, and the content of the expression is imaginative. Every wall becomes a writing surface, covered with slogans, questions, statements, humor. Posters created by the art students bedeck the streets of Paris. It is the one industry that will flourish during the next few weeks.
Arriving to make known his new decisions on Vietnam to a highly tensed Washington press conference, which is attended by his family, President Johnson explains the reasons for his actions in these historic words.
We intend to convince the communists that we cannot be defeated by force of arms or by superior power. They're not easily convinced. In recent months, they have greatly increased their fighting forces and their attacks and the numbers of incidents.
You my opposer when I want freedom. You my opposer when I want justice. You my opposer when I want equality. You won't even stand up for me in America for my religious beliefs, and you want me to go somewhere and fight, but you won't even stand up for me here at home.
It staggers the imagination, the sheer volume of high explosives dropped in the Vietnam War.
These people and the government of the DRV severely warn and condemn the Nixon administration for these extremely serious acts of war against the DRV.
Let it be, let it be, let it be, yeah, let it be. Whisper words of wisdom, let it be. And when the night is cloudy, there is still a light that shines on me. Shine until tomorrow, let it be. I wake up to the sound of music. Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Yeah, let it be.
Needless to say, as the President of the United States, I have many responsibilities and many goals. Goals, not just personal goals, but primarily goals for our country. But I can assure you, the greatest purpose and the greatest goal I have, and the greatest purpose and the greatest goal the American people have, is to play a role to bring peace not only to America, but to all the world.
The challenge is there. Industrial relations, acts, civil courts, the police, the judiciary, they're all there lined up against the working class people in order to lower their standards. Our only weapon is our unity, our only weapon is our strength. If we unite and use that strength in order to oppose the laws in the same ways that our predecessors did, then, apart from bringing about a trade union movement, we will be able to secure its future in order to advance the standard of living of the working class people in this country.
Hold your banners up and let them be on display. Hold them up high. Show your banners. Show your solidarity. We are free trade unions. We're not Nazi victims yet. We're free trade unions. Hold your banners up. Hold yourselves up at all. We are the working class. And we're going to get 5 comrades out of that concentration camp. The casual workers have made their decision in the fleet. We hope the decision of all other workers throughout this country is to see that when those lads are locked up inside there, let's lock every factory gate in the country, because there's only one key to that bloody door. Mass workers' action, mass participation in strike action, and demonstrations like this that must grow and grow and grow.
The majority of marchers had concerns much closer to home. They were workers from Tate & Lyle refineries who fear the death of their industry.
What's the point of the funeral gear and the coffin?
Well, the reason for today's demonstration is this is symbolising the death of 9,000 jobs in the sugar industry. But over the common market issue on the agricultural policy, we are trying to make the government change their minds in some way in which they will alter this agreement so to keep these 9,000 jobs in the cane industry.
Sugar in the morning, sugar in the evening, sugar at supper time. Be my little sugar and love me
Tell me about White Riot. What's it about?
Notting Gate.
Like, you know that riot they had? Well, we was down there, me and him. And we got searched by policemen looking for bricks. Later on, we got searched by Rasta looking for pound notes in our pockets, so...
All we had was bricks and bottles.
The Pistols and the Clash spearheaded the nascent punk movement with a two-pronged insurgency aimed at the powers that be. They tapped the mood of violence simmering under the surface of boring 70s Britain and would bear witness when it spilled over. Without this conflict at its heart, punk would have been little more than noisy pop music. Anarchy in the UK hit the streets in November '76. It was time for punk to go above ground and into direct contact with those it was designed to offend.
We have done everything humanly possible to ban this thing and to stop it.
1977, the year of punk, was just around the corner.
Go on, you've got another 5 seconds. Say something outrageous.
You dirty bastard.
Go on, again.
You dirty fucker.
What a clever boy.
What a fucking rotter.
Well, that's it for tonight.
And 9 striking Yorkshire miners have been allowed to appeal against magistrates' bail conditions, ordering them not to picket.
His record is absolutely appalling. And if we're going to judge people, and we're going to judge standards by terms of achievement, then his record over the past 12 months means that he ought to have been made redundant any time during the course of that period. Here we have a mining community, like others throughout Britain at the present time, who are fighting simply for the right to work. They know and I know that to create unemployment costs twice as much as it does to keep them in employment. As far as we're concerned, we're going to win this battle.
Are you prepared to give any ground in the talks tomorrow at all?
No comment. You keep asking, but you'll not get an answer.
Sporadic fighting between police and rioters is still going on in the West End of London.
But when will the Prime Minister recognise that because of the basic unfairness of poll tax, there are thousands of people in North East Lancashire and millions of people in this country who won't pay, but cannot afford to pay the poll tax. And as a result of inflation and the government forcing up mortgages and council house rent, that position will become worse. When is she going to do something to help those people who cannot afford to pay their poll tax?
Speaker, the honourable gentleman comes from Lancashire, where the county has a very, very high community charge, far higher than the amount considered reasonable by the government, and that is being passed on to all the districts. But Burnley, of course, has received 101 pounds in safety net, so it's often better off than many others. The taxpayer will be paying something like £3 billion towards community charge rebate and, of course, also towards the transitional relief. That is a very excellent amount for those who cannot afford to pay, and for those, in fact, who have a sudden increase in tax to be able to get the transitional relief.
To retreat now, I believe, would put at hazard all that we hold dearest. Turn the United Nations back into a talking shop, stifle the first steps of progress in the Middle East, leave the Iraqi people to the mercy of events on which we would have relinquished all power to influence for the better. Tell our allies that at the very moment of action, at the very moment when they need our determination, that Britain faltered. I will not be party to such a course. This is not the time to falter. This is the time for this House, not just this government or indeed this Prime Minister, but for this House to give a lead, to show that we will stand up for what we know to be right.
Big Ben tolled as the huge crowd marched to stop the countdown to war against Iraq. A seemingly endless current of marchers.
Oh, it was tremendous. I mean, I think it's one of the few demonstrations where people really thought they could stop a war, and therefore they felt them turning out individually as opposed to reading about it in the newspaper or saying, oh, that's a good thing, when they watched it on television.
As Mayor of London, I can officially welcome you here to this city in the biggest political demonstration in 2,000 years of British history.
It's hard to think of any one event that has brought so many different nations' protest movements together in that way. And I think it's just, people aren't stupid. They could see that what George W. Bush was about wasn't human rights, it was about controlling the oil. And they didn't think that killing tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people in the Middle East was worth that.
In Sydney, more than 200,000 demonstrators crammed into Hyde Park before bringing the city to a standstill.
The crowd here in New York City is quite larger than they had expected. We know right now that they are blocking off from 52nd Street all the way down to 72nd Street on First Avenue north of the United Nations.
Every faith, every age, every race. I have never seen anything that brought the diversity of British people together so much.
More than 1 million, say police, on the streets of the Eternal City.
America thought it was unstoppable after the collapse of the Soviet Union. What it did have was its own population, the British population, the population of all of its allies, was saying, you're not doing this in our name. We don't agree with this. We do not want this to happen, and we think that if you're reordering the world, you shouldn't be doing it by invading and bombing and occupying other people's countries.
We did not want this war, but in refusing to give up his weapons of mass destruction, Saddam gave us no choice but to act. Now that the war has begun, it will be seen through to the end.
Broken promises. There have been too many in the last few years, too many in the last 30 years. In fact, our nation has been littered with them, a trail of broken promises. You remember them: fairer taxes, a promise broken; better schools for everyone, a promise broken; cleaner politics, a promise broken. I believe it's time to do things differently. I believe it's time for fairness in Britain. I believe it's time for promises to be kept.
Thousands of students have clashed with police at Westminster today during a mass demonstration against plans to increase university tuition fees in England. Some protesters converged on the building where the Conservative Party has its main offices, setting fire to placards and some of them smashing windows.
Trouble in central London began brewing this morning, even before the Commons debate started, as mounted police tried, without success, to stop protesters from gathering outside the House of Votes in Parliament may not deter violent protests or quell public anger. Parliament Square has been cleared tonight for now, but many demonstrators are inspired by what happened with the poll tax 20 years ago. That too was agreed by MPs, but ministers eventually ditched it after violent street battles and deep public hostility.
Nobody expected young people to act like that. Nobody expected young people to really show the government up like that. And that's that kind of magic moment that I've been trying to get back ever since for the last 4 years, basically.
But I would say politicians don't really target young voters at all. So it's not so much the lies, because politicians always make core and non-core promises. It's so much that they just don't care about young people at all. Or if they do, it's a kind of negative care. Policies that are designed to target young people, vilify young people, portray young people basically as knife-wielding hoodies, forgetting that young people are actually, they go to school, they go to university, they work, they pay taxes, they do all the things that old people did when they were young, but now it's completely out of order that anyone would want to do those things.
This is what I noticed when I was in that Houses of Parliament. It's decorated exactly the same as Eton, it's decorated exactly the same as Oxford, so a certain type of people goes in there and thinks, oh, this makes me nervous, and another type of people go in there and go, this is how it should be. And I think that's got to change now. We can no longer have erroneous, duplicitous systems held in place unless it's for the only systems that serve the planet and serve the population of the planet can be allowed to survive. Not ones that serve elites, be they political or corporate elites. And this is what's currently happening.
Having young people involved in politics is critical. The question is, how do you do it?
There's going to be a revolution. It's totally going to happen. I think not only I ain't got a flicker of doubt. This is the end. This is time to wake up.
revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts without commercial interruptions. The revolution will not show you pictures of Nixon blowing a bugle and leading a charge by John Mitchell, General Abrams, and Spyro Agnew to eat hog maws confiscated from a Harlem sanctuary. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by the Schaefer Award Theater and will not star Natalie Woods and Steve McQueen or Bullwinkle and Julia. The revolution will not give your mouth sex appeal. The revolution will not get rid of the nub. The revolution will not make you look 5 pounds thinner because the revolution will not be televised, brother. There will be no pictures of you and Willie Mae pushing that shopping cart down the block on the dead run or trying to slide that color TV into a stolen ambulance. NBC will not be able to predict the winner at 8:32 on report from 29 districts. The revolution will not be televised.